In this video, we'll be looking at how we can use clone objects to create some interesting shapes, such as this poinsettia. To start off, we're going to open up our Bernina DesignWorks software. We're going to create a new design, so I'm going to click Next. Fabric does matter because we are using stitches, so I went with Embroidery Normal, selected the cotton, and chose this yellowy tan, and selected Next. I'm going to do a new graphic, and for my hoop I want the Bernina large oval hoop with the number 44 c-foot. I'm going to click Finish. I want to make sure my guidelines are showing, which mine are, but if they are not, go to View at the top and make sure there's a check mark next to Guidelines. I want to add another guideline. To do that, I'm going to right click on my ruler at the top, select Add New Guideline, and choose Diagonal. And that's just kind of going off into nowhere, which we want to fix. So we're going to right click on that ruler again, select Guideline Editor. This dialog box will pop up. We're going to select our diagonal guideline. We're going to make the X coordinate 0, the Y coordinate 0, and our angle 60. Not 660, 60. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and close that, and I should just have this nice line going through the center of my hoop at a 60-degree angle. So now my workspace is prepped, I can grab my oval I'm going to use. So I'm going to come over to the left and select the Create Ellipse tool. I'm going to left click and drag to create an oval, and I don't care where it's at, what size it is, or anything, because I'm just going to change it. I'm going to hit space bar, which will take me out of Create Ellipse tool. And then I'm going to go to my tool options. I'm going to change my X to 0, Y to 0. My width, I want it to be 0.75, but when I type that in, it does go to 0.749, which is fine. That's close enough. And then I want my height to be 2.25. And then I'm going to look at my notes and realize that Y does not need to be 0. It needs to be 1.25. There we go. That looks better. So I have one oval. I need multiple ovals to make a flower. So I'm going to do a couple things to prep it, and then we'll make multiple ovals. First things, I'm going to right click on it and say Convert to Curves. This will give me more editing options for it. Then I'm going to go to Edit at the top and click on Add New Objects as Clones, which is what this entire lesson's about. So a clone means that you can edit one shape and all the other ones like it will be edited in the same way. So now I want multiple ovals. I'm going to click and drag this crosshair that's in the middle of the oval to the middle of my hoop. And I'm trying to get the vertical and horizontal guidelines to highlight like this. And now I'm ready to rotate. So I'm going to go to the upper right hand corner, get my rotation icon. I'm going to left click and drag. And when the dot that's the middle of the oval lines up with my guideline, I'm going to not let go of that left click. Instead, I'm going to right click, let go of the left click, and then let go of the right click. So by right clicking, it tells the software I want to make a duplicate. I don't want to just move the original design. And then when I let go of the right click, luckily it opens this up and I can just come down to Repeat Last Transformation, which will get me a third oval. I'm going to right click and select Repeat Last Transformation until I have 12 ovals, which will go all the way around. There we go. And now I want to make them into the poinsettia leaf shape. So I'm going to select my first oval. I'm going to go to the Edit Shape Nodes icon. I'm going to select this top node, and then I'm going to right click and change it to a cusp node. This means those arrows that go off from either side to it act independently, and I can get sharp corners. I'm going to click and drag the left arrow until it points at the left circle node. And I'm going to do the same thing with the right arrow. if I wanted to spend more time and I wanted to make a different kind of flower, I could add more nodes. I could do almost anything to this line I want to, or anything to this oval. I'm going to press spacebar on my keyboard to get out of edit shape nodes because I'm happy with how this looks. I want to select everything, so I'm going to go to edit, select all. I'm going to right click on my poinsettia and I'm going to group it. And right now in my sequence manager, I have a whole bunch of layers. I don't want to see a whole bunch of layers, so I'm going to click on this paintbrush that's kind of in the middle, and this collapses all the layers into one, which is super helpful. And then with that selected, I'm going to click on duplicate. And then, but you can't tell it did anything because everything that has the same properties are in the same layer. So I'm going to change my properties by changing my colors. I'm going to make the outline red by clicking in the upper left-hand corner of a red thread palette. And specifically, I want a dark red. And then I'm going to click on the lower right-hand corner of the no color chip to say I do not want to fill. So now I have this outline design as my layer 2. So, and it's good for right now. We'll come back to it in a little bit. We're going to select layer 1. And I want to weld all my ovals together in this layer. So I'm going to come up to the top to weld and click on it. And then I'm going to go to my fill tab in my object properties and say I want it to be applique. I'm going to go to my outline tab and not do anything. I'm going to go back to my fill tab because I forgot something. I'm going to go put a check mark next to cleaning. And we want it to be laser cut, saying that we are cutting this out with our cut work tool. Now I want to add some color to it, and I'm going to make it a lighter red than before. So I'm going to add a fill by clicking in the lower right-hand corner of a red color chip, and an outline by clicking in the upper left-hand corner of the color chip. One thing I don't like about this flower right now is it has a hole in the middle of my applique, and I don't want that. So I'm going to right click on my design, and this is with layer 1 still selected. I'm going to break it apart, then I'm going to right click again and ungroup it. And so now if I look at my sequence manager, I have this circle looking thing. And depending on how you have your sequence manager set, it could be really big. And it's not really a circle, it's closer to a dodecahedron or 12-sided polygon, but we don't care what it is, we just want to select it and delete it because we don't need it. And now we don't have a hole, and it's going to stitch out way better. So then I'm going to select layer 2 because I'm going to use layer 2 as my cover stitch. And I'm using layer 2 because it has more of that spirograph effect. And for my cover stitch, I'm going to choose stitch number 35. I'm going to do an offset of -1 millimeters. So this is going to pull it in a little bit and make sure that all the edges of the applique fabric are caught. And then I'm going to put a check mark next to length and change my length to 3 millimeters and press enter. So if I click off and kind of zoom in, you can see I get that really cool effect with the stitches. So this is interesting, but what if we want some green leaves? So we're going to select layer 1, which is our applique, and we're going to duplicate it because that's going to turn into our leaves. We're going to rotate that by 15 degrees. And we're going to make it green. So I'm going to click in the lower right-hand corner of a green color chip and the upper left-hand corner of a green color chip. Then I want to change my stitch type. I mean, I still want running, but we want pattern number 36. And to make it a little bit easier, because if I zoom in on this, most of the stitching is not inside of it, so I'm going to put a check mark next to mirror style. Again, I want to do an offset of -1, which will pull it in, and I'm going to put a check mark next to length, and we're going to change our length to 3. So the last thing we need to do is our green is on top of our red, so we're going to left click and drag our green in our sequence manager down to the beginning. and then it will end up behind everything. And because I noticed something, I'm going to select layer number 3. Okay, it went back to being good. At one point it looked like it was a little bit off, but we're good. So at this point, our poinsettia is done, and we're just going to save it. So File, Save As, and name it something like Applique Poinsettia. So File, Save As, Applique Poinsettia. But don't close it yet because we can still create our cutwork file. To do that, we're going to select layer 2. We're going to go to Edit, Copy, File, New. We want the exact same fabric, so click Next. We want a new graphic, but the same hoop, so click Finish. And then we're going to go to Edit and Paste. Now for this, we're going to say that, go to our Fill tab first and say we don't want to fill. There's no fill. Then we're going to go back to our Outline tab, say we want it to be cut work. We're going to put a check mark next to running before and do an offset of 1 millimeter. I like the running before stitch because it tacks the fabric to my stabilizer before it cuts out. I also use it as a placement line where I stitch it once and then go back to stitch it again to actually tack my fabric down. Now one thing is, if I zoom in, this does not actually quite fit in the hoop. This dotted line is the edge of the hoop. So with it still selected, I'm going to rotate it by 15 degrees, which will make it fit beautifully with the 44C foot in. So now this cutwork file is ready to go. We're going to save it. So File, Save As. And this would be something like Poinsettia Cut. And because we use the exact same shape for the red and green leaves, they can be cut all together. So you only have one cut file for all your applique for this design. Hope you got inspired by this lesson. And this was Rachel with Bernina of Oklahoma City giving you another little DesignWorks tidbit.